Welcome to the Gravel Lot, the place where bikes are for everyone.
The Gravel Lot podcast is presented by Be Free Ride Bikes Apparel, providing a fully customized cycling apparel experience to provide you and your team the attention to detail and personal touch that you deserve.
And also brought to you by Grimpore Brothers Coffee, offering handmade coffee roasted weekly in small batches to give you the finest quality coffee to start your day. Choose their subscription service and earn your free bag of coffee today.
And by Hand Up Gloves. Great gear, better times. Providing a wide range of apparel for bikes, snow sports, and golf in multiple designs and fits to let your personality shine.
Our goal with the Gravel Lot is to inspire cyclists of all stripes to ride bikes, share their story, and have fun. We love all bikes and anyone who wants to ride them. So no matter where you sit on the spectrum of bikes, we'll always have a place for you in the Gravel Lot.
And now, the hosts of TGL, John Woolry and Doug McClintock.
Hello and welcome back once again to the Gravel Lot, the official podcast for all things cycling. I'm John, that's Doug, and he's laughing because I made him laugh in the last 3 seconds before we hit record. So, whether you are a new Pebble or an existing Pebble, welcome. Thank you for finding us. We are so happy that you are here. For the new folks, what is the Gravel Lot? Well, long story short, Doug and I think everybody that follows this show on a regular basis, believes that the only thing better than going on a bike ride is sharing that bike ride with all of your friends, whether it's 1 or 1,000. So let's talk about it. We love bikes. We love hearing about bikes. We love talking about bikes. But I think more importantly than that, the things that we get so much enjoyment out of are hearing people's stories, hearing them tell us their stories, and then being able to ask them follow-up questions about what makes them tick. So we're trying to give you guys a little bit of a better idea of who these people are. And I think I am really excited to get into today's conversation because there is so much meat that we can talk about. So if you guys like what you hear today, hit subscribe, hit the like button, get the notifications, do all the things that the internet wants you to do to let it know, for you to let it know. I always mess this up.
It's okay. It's okay.
Tell the internet you like the Gravel Lot.
Reward the internet.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's important to reward the
internet. Our future AI overlords that you like the Gravel Lot and to spare us when the time comes.
Yeah, don't make NFTs out of us. That's not cool. We're not here for
unless
that.
You involve us.
Yeah. Okay, maybe. I don't know. I'm not here for NFT, but I'll take the money. That's all. I don't want any of the other parts of it.
And we'll give it back. We'll put it back in the bike community.
Yeah, something like that. Make sure to leave the comments below if you are on the live stream. We'd love to have them. Trust me, this week's guest is excellent, and we're going to have tons of things we can talk about in the back section. Hit up the link in our show notes and check out our Etsy store. Check out the website. Go support us on Patreon. Thank you, Patreon supporters. Y'all are keeping everything flowing as we're rolling out of season 4 and getting ready to roll into season 5. Season 5 are... I don't know. What's the anniversary for 5? I don't know. The something anniversary. That's us.
Yeah.
Someone let us know what that is.
We just had our 4th birthday. So
yeah,
starting the 5th lap.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyway, there's
new graphics coming. That's all.
Right. Exactly. John's already
going to be yet, but there's apparently going to be new
blur.
graphics.
It's a blur. Make sure to check out all our partners that we mentioned in the intro. They're exceptional. They do an amazing job. We're so thankful for them. Support them. It's holiday season. You're probably past this, but maybe you're buying New Year's gifts for people because it's Christmas Eve day or something. I don't even know when this is coming out. But you are way past the due date, but maybe you owe someone a gift that you should probably do. Go visit our partners and they'll sort that out. And if you want to send questions or feedback, you can do that on the website. All the socials, we're at the Gravel Lot, or our phone number 513-400-5577. Give us a call, send us a text, give us some information. We're happy to help with whatever you need, whatever it is. I think everything that we would help you with, right?
Yeah, whatever.
If you need something, just send us a text. We'll see if we can help out.
Figure it out.
So, John, how's the ride been the past few weeks?
It's good. There's a lot to talk about. We just had cyclocross nationals. Big goings on at USAC.
Yeah.
We've got
today
World Cup season in full swing. Yeah. Not gonna be investing in a purple mattress anytime soon.
Nope.
But no, it's good. It's great to watch nationals for a couple days on. I mean, granted, I know there's a lot of people that are frustrated about the Flow Sports thing, but uh, you guys know I love auto racing, so I've been burning up my Flow Sports account all season, all year. So the fact that this is just an added bonus that I get to watch nationals and get to watch all my friends race in the lower category races all the way from Wednesday through Sunday, awesome. But then to
Excellent.
go watch all of our guests that we've had on the show, and all the officials, and hearing Julian Scott in the background, and just everybody that's a part of this whole cycling community, just putting on another amazing event up in Chicago. Um, couldn't be happier for everybody, and it's thinking back to when everybody came into town for Kings, and just how it reinvigorated my love of what our community is capable of when everybody kind of bands together, and just thinking about reflecting on last week's or last episode, 200 episodes, and talking about what this show means is just the amount of people that we've collected and are able to call friends. It's immeasurable, and being able to watch them on TV and watch them go bike race and try and beat the crap out of each other, it's awesome.
I think that's good. I think for me over the past couple weeks, that's definitely been a bit of it, especially since we did the last episode. There's a lot been a reflection of like what's up with us and where we're at. And I think, especially with given all the things that have happened, like what transpired at nationals with a bunch of with a hate group showing up and causing problems. And my dogs are downstairs causing problems. My apologies.
Not to be confused with the two.
No, they are very different. They are not a hate group; they are a love group.
Right.
But you have that happen, and then the departure of Rob DiMartini and the impending potential replacement at some point in time of someone else. I think it's interesting to reflect on all the things that have happened and where we're at right now, and think about how the community can come together to do positive things, and it is not always on our NGB to do those positive things, and that the word the bike community, and I tweeted this out earlier this week, was the bike community isn't really a thing. It's what you're doing in your space. It's what you're doing in the people that you touch. It's the work that you do. You can't fix the community at large, and to think about it as a homogenous community where everyone has the same values and the same feelings, that is not a thing. It doesn't exist. And so I've been trying to reckon with that, because you have these outside forces, and you have people making bad decisions at our NGB and causing problems when there are good people within our NGB, and you have all of these competing pieces of it. So how do we think about this a little more holistically? And I think I'm kind of just getting back down to, okay, what am I doing here? What are we doing with TGL? What am I doing locally? What are the things that really matter to me? And how am I affecting that positively in my community? And I think that's kind of where my head's been, because I'm, due to some other things that are going on, I'm very hyper local right now. And hyper locality is everything, your environment, the space you're in, all the things you're worrying about, like you can affect those things. So it doesn't mean don't talk about the things that are large and big and macro, and address them, but make change locally where you can, and do that stuff. So I've really been thinking a lot about that the past couple weeks.
Yeah,
So
I think that's good. And the article that you shared, we were talking about it earlier this week, of like the idea that just because you ride a bike means you're part of the cycling community. Like to me, that's a logical fallacy in the sense that, yeah, you ride a bike, that's cool. Like being a cyclist, how you define yourself, that's awesome, but that's singular. And I think to Doug's point of, what can you do rather than go on Twitter and complain, that doesn't move
which
the
I
needle.
do, to be clear, I do complain on
But the volume, if you're the blind scales of justice in Doug's world, the amount of tweets that you're putting out complaining about things is heavily overweighed by the things that you're trying to put in time to locally to affect change and make things better, or more open, more applicable, things like that. So I
yeah.
think it's a valid challenge right now of not waiting and seeing what USAC does to put somebody into a leadership position. I think we need to hold their feet to the fire to make sure that we get the right person, and then hold
Yeah.
that person accountable. But
It's a balance.
that's not
The
what
balance
makes
of those things.
that's not what put nationals on. Like Rob isn't
Sure.
what put nationals on. Rob isn't what makes the national team go across, overseas to Europe and compete. And he's not like it's one person, but the people that are putting the events on and the people that are riding with you in your group ride and all of that stuff is really what builds community and the things that actually make things happen.
Yeah. So good to have some perspective through all of this.
And we're going to be talking about this for the next hour, so get
Yeah.
comfortable.
So I think John, that's the
Segue
perfect
time.
time. I think this is now like where we bring in this week's guest. So today, TGL has, and if we can, we'll see if he'll visibly show up. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, we have his picture.
we had static picture, so he got the tease. Today, TGL has privilege of interviewing arguably one of the most influential people in the history of mountain bikes in the United States. He has been part of the fat tire world since the mid 80s and has stepped across podiums and atop podiums throughout the world. Is a multi-time national champion, an Olympian, a multi-time Leadville winner. And in the mid 2000s, he dug deep into the advocacy world and has been expanding his footprint on our world ever since. We're here to dive right in this week and see what's going on and new. Dave, guys, it's Dave freaking Wiens. Dave, welcome to the Gravel Lot.
Thanks, fellas. I'm really happy to be here, but I must make one correction. I'm married to an Olympian.
I thought you went to the Olympics.
I did. I went there and worked.
Whatever. That's the same thing. You are married to an Olympian. To be clear, your wife is a stellar talent, and that is true. So you can go upstairs and tell your mom. Dave's in his mom's basement, guys.
It's actually garden level.
So coming to you live from Dave's mom's basement or garden level basement, whatever. So
you're the holidays.
Yeah, it's fine. That's good. It's good. You're good. You're a little closer to Denver right now, where you kind of grew up, right?
Yeah. Definitely grew up in suburban Denver, and my family's still here. My mom, my dad, my brother, and some aunts and uncles. So Denver's always good to come back. Although the city's grown a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's probably way different than it was in the 80s. So we like to kind of like start in that space and time where people figure out where they find bikes. And I know you've told your story a bit, but let's give the TGL listeners the abridged version to some extent. You fell in love with bikes as a kid, like I think like a lot of people, right?
Yeah. And for me, it was the transportation and the exploration and the independence. And I still, I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I still vividly remember my dad taking the training wheels off my bike and heading down the street on, two wheels, and just the exhilaration, the wind in your hair, that whole, what we all say, it's absolutely true. And from an early age, getting that first bike, that was a hand-me-down bike, had that for a while. And, little things like in Jefferson County public schools where I went to school, you couldn't ride your bike to school until you were in third grade. And it was a big deal. I remember it was a big deal when I was in third grade, because I started riding my bike to school, the 4 or 5 blocks that it was.
How old are you in third grade? Like, how old's third grade? What, like
8?
8 or 9?
8?
Yeah.
Is that like when you become like capable of like navigating? They're like, well, when you're 8, you can do it. Not at 7.
Well, and remember, these were in the days when nobody was driven to school by their parents.
That's true. Yeah, that didn't happen.
Walking, bicycles, or buses, and there was no place to drop. Now, of course, the drop off is just massive, but it was a different time. It was a different time.
So you got to ride your bike to school when you're 8. Like, did that involve shenanigans before and after school? Because I know that's a thing that happened when I was able to ride my bike to school.
A little bit. But what I mainly remember is that my mom and dad both worked. My brother he was already gone to school. He would leave earlier or something. I was home alone. I could watch the Flintstones and I could see the credits roll and then jump out and jump on my bike and get to school and not be late for an 8:30 start.
Nice.
But then, of course, I met up with one of my friends was on the route, and But yeah, we did the usual, building the little wooden jumps and things like that. But for me, it really was all about my bike can take me places because walking just wouldn't cut it for me. And I mean, the story I tell is I want to go golfing. And so, yeah, I could have my mom take me or I could get a ride, but I could also take my dad's golf clubs, which are one of those pull behind carts and some parachute cord and tie it onto below my saddle. And I could drag these golf clubs to the golf course. And if there's hills, and of course, at one point the golf clubs come off my bike and
Whatever. It's a peerless strategy.
yeah, my dad never knew why his handle was all, raw underneath, but
Yeah, it's
So
fine.
your dad wasn't an avid golfer. He was an
no,
occasional
no,
golfer.
very, very much so.
So okay, so clearly we've got a little bit of adventure. You're not giving us the full, taking the lid off of all the shenanigans. But there's a big difference between feeling the wind in your hair and thinking that this is my mode of transportation, and then turning that into, this is my profession. This is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. So what does that arc in your life look like around? I know you explored a bunch of different outdoor activities and tried a bunch of different stuff, but what does it come back to of like, I'm going to go try all of these things and I end up coming back to this specific thing that I kind of started with?
Yeah, so I was into outdoor rec in high school, and at the age of 14, I became very interested in rivers and rafting, and that led to river trips. In the West, I owned my own raft. As a 14-year-old, and not every 14-year-old then, had a giant raft that they could blow up in their basement. Their parents are just shaking their head. That eventually led to kayaking, and then I was also an avid downhill skier in those days. So it was skiing in the winter and it was kayaking in the summer. And then there was some, backpacking was thrown in there. So certainly a relatively early adopter of the outdoor rec lifestyle that's so big right now. And as I'm doing that, the mountain bike is there. It exists. It's on my radar. I see the Specialized stump jumper, but it's $700-800. And I just don't have that money because I've got a kayak and paddles and a quiver of skis. And I called it the elusive toy. I wanted one, and I knew eventually I would have one. In 1982, I had purchased a road bike, Nishiki International, which was and I worked in a retailer in Denver as a high school when I was high school age, and it was a specialty alpine ski shop, but we also had backpacking, camping, tennis, sneakers. They had a bike shop, but it was very much a mom and pop bike shop. In fact, when mountain bikes came out, the owners of the store were like, yeah, we're not bringing those things in. That's a fad. We're just going to stick with what we in those days called 10 speeds.
Yeah. That's what we called it when I was growing up. Yeah, I got a 10 speed, right? Yeah, it's not a road bike. It's a 10 speed. It's got 10 speeds.
Exactly. Right. I had a 10 speed and kind of got into road riding a little bit as a freshman at Western State in Gunnison when I went there. For whatever reason, I remember buying the stuff, but it didn't really grab me. I went for one long ride and I rode east, and you never ride east in Gunnison because you have a tailwind, which means so I got 30 miles out. I was like, man, I love this. And I turned around and it was like, I blew so hard out there. And this is, when I was 18 years old. And I remember just limping home. And I don't know if I rode that bike again. But anyway,
I saw the wind speeds that are about to happen in Colorado tonight, and I was like, "The hell, I'm going out there." I'm thinking sad for Katie Macarelli, my friend Corey, all our friends in Colorado. Don't go riding tonight.
I love this because everybody listening to the Gravel-Lot just related so strongly to David Wiens, because I think we've just all had that of like, I got this, I don't got this
at all. No, 9 times out of 10, if we ride our road bikes, we ride west into the wind, and then you get carried home.
Yeah.
Rarely do we ride to the east, but eventually in 1985, I purchased a stump jumper, an 85 stump jumper from that shop. We sold Specialized components, so we had a Specialized rep, a gentleman named Scott Carpenter, and he got me a closeout. Imagine, a closeout. They couldn't sell all these bikes at that point, so I was able to get a closeout for cost, and built that bike up. And so now I'm a kayaker, a skier, and a mountain biker. And I remember taking that bike I was moving to Jackson Hole for the winter to be a ski bum. Took that bike up there. Had never ridden on trails. There's actually a chapter before that where we ordered some some like beach cruisers, 5 speeds with side pull brakes, and a buddy of mine, and tried kind of to get into mountain biking, but they weren't proper mountain bikes. And we did ride those on the nature trails at the Cherry Creek State Park, which I'm sure are off limits to bikes these days. But in 1982 or 83, when we did that, they weren't. And I was telling somebody today about that was my first mountain bike ride. And we came out of there after just derbying around on these twisty little dead flat nature trails, just both of us looking to like, that's the funnest thing that I've ever done in my entire life. And it was, but those bikes weren't, they couldn't quite cut it. So there was a bit of a hiccup there, but eventually, found myself, didn't really ride in Jackson much because it was obviously winter time. Did go out into the elk refuge one night on that bike, late in the evening in December. And while I was out there, a ground blizzard blew up. And all of a sudden, I'm out, and the elk refuge is a couple miles out of town. But when you're in a ground blizzard, you're basically, you don't know which way is any way. And I'm thinking, I'm going to die out here. I moved to Jackson Hole. I'm going to die with this stupid bicycle out on this road. And then all of a sudden here comes some headlights and this old rancher in an old pickup. And I flag him down, and I didn't even ask him. I just put my bike in the back and I just jumped in. And I mean, he knew, and I'm sure that was sort of a sign of what was going to be coming. I'm sure it wasn't the very first sign, but certainly toward the front end of this isn't the Jackson Hole I grew up in. But he might have saved my life actually by taking me back to town. And then bike just sat there. Ended up in Alaska that next summer and rode the bike in Denali National Park. I was a river guide up there, and there were some trails around McKinley Village that I'm sure are closed to bikes now as well in the national park. But at that time, had a bell on the bike just jingling all the time because of the grizzly bears. Wearing jeans,
just because those grizzly bears, that thing.
Deal. It's like,
well, no, and being kind of frightened, but like, okay, if they hear you coming, they'll run away as opposed to startling them. And riding in jeans and flannel. I mean, I had a mountain bike. Maybe I had a helmet, maybe a Bell V1 Pro. That was it. And didn't know much more about the sport than that. But actually in Alaska, did a couple races that summer. The Mountain Bike Association of Alaska, MBAA. They put on the Idita-bike years and years ago. I mean, they were doing Idita-bikes then, I think. Wow. So they had a bit of a mountain biking culture up there, and did a couple little races up there, and found it to be, pretty fun. And that's where I got the taste, I guess, of it. And then went back to Gunnison to go to school, and all my buddies from, and I was kind of on again, off again with school, and they were racing bikes, and it was really easy just to slot in with them in Colorado. That was sort of one of the epicenters of mountain bike racing, and started racing 86, 87, right in there.
So who'd have thunk, Dave, in 1985 that you would have been on the 2020, 2021 cutting edge of mountain bike fashion, wearing Levi's and flannels to ride your mountain bike?
Right, exactly.
I think it's funny that you're like, I didn't know anything about the culture, I didn't know anything about that, but it's like I'm thinking like all of my Instagram feed and my Facebook feed of all of the cyclists, and it's like cut off jeans and like
jorts,
flannels and jorts, and I'm like, man, this is copying Dave Wiens at this point.
There was a time when when fashion and mountain biking they didn't go together. It was whatever you had. And then it became, if you were actually a bit of a mountain biker, you had your black shorts and whatever ugly jersey that didn't match necessarily. And still, if you go to some places like the Midwest, I'll do some rides, and maybe it's changed now and everybody's adopted the flannel thing, but it'll be just a bunch of, a mix mash of just different jerseys, 3-pocket jerseys. I know it's not fashionable to wear Lycra. I actually like wearing Lycra now because it's so uncommon to see it. Everyone's wearing the flannel and the shorts and what they painted the house in. That's the style. So I feel unique wearing Lycra out there. And the reason, real quick, is I show up for a ride with Travis Brown, and he's one of the guys from sort of my era, a little bit younger, and we're gonna go riding in Durango. And I'm thinking, Travis, he's a cool guy. He's got the he'll be wearing the flannels and the cutoffs, and he's like Lycra head to toe, a really nice Bontrager kit, like camo. And I'm like, dang, Travis Brown rocking the Lycra. I'm in. That was just a couple of years ago. So,
well, it's good. You got to stay relevant. And you know what? If you're pushing the fashion trend, Dave, I think you're ultimately setting the pace for everyone else. I think you're going to lead us back to the Lycra, and I'm here for this. Maybe we can get rid of the badly sublimated 3-pocket jerseys that still exist here ubiquitously in the Midwest at every event anywhere. They still are here. But I think we can get back to the Lycra era if that's where we're headed in fashion. So everyone, you've heard it here first. Mountain bike fashion coming back to Lycra.
Yeah,
I won't hold my
no more
breath.
snagging the honeysuckle.
Yeah, right. No more snagging honeysuckle. 100%. That's definitely a problem we have here.
Okay, so I think there's anyone listening to this, watching this, Google it. You can read the interviews. You can listen to the interviews about Dave's pro career. I don't think that any of us need to belabor any of those points about, the things that you've accomplished, beating Lance Armstrong and at Leadville and all of the wins that you've had. But
dismantling Floyd as well. Let's be
yes,
clear.
yeah, I think that's a good word. Like that's the proper term for it. But I think we can move past that, and I kind of want to move straight into kind of your post pro career of how you got into trail advocacy. So I think first off, what does your kind of blend? Because I know it's not like you hang up your helmet one day and then you like walk into IMBA headquarters on the second day. But like, what was your blend of going from being pro racer and then figuring out how to get engaged with actual trail advocacy? What did that look like from your lens?
Well, it actually started as soon as I moved back to Gunnison in 1987. So, like a lot of places around the world where there were mountain bikes, there were mountain bikers, we quickly realized there weren't necessarily a lot of great places to ride. I mean, we'd all tasted just enough good trail riding to know what it could be. And then we went out into mountain biking was a huge exploration back then. And you're looking at maps and you're looking for trails and you're going out and you're riding and you're seeing a cow trail. And it was just this search for quality trails. And they didn't exist in a lot of places. And Crested Butte had some pretty good stuff going on, but it was, there were some pioneers that had already kind of charted the course up there. And I had some people that were great to say, hey, you should go ride this Dr. Park ride is fantastic. I mean, that's just an old Forest Service trail that the mountain bikers, it happened to be really great for mountain biking. Trail 401, Trail 403, Reno Flag Bear, some of the classics up toward Crested Butte that are still classics today were just regular trails that mountain bikers, stumbled upon. And then some of the other areas that were more off the beaten path hadn't necessarily been explored yet. You couldn't go out and find any information on these, and you had to go ride it to decide. And there were some trails like the Star Trail was like, yep, that trail is terrible. I'm never going to go ride that again. So part of that then was helping to create better trails closer to where we lived. And so in Gunnison, that was the Hartman Rocks area where the Rage and the Sage race took place. There was a little tiny bit of single track in that race, but not a lot. And one of the single tracks there had kind of been pioneered by cattle and motos. And there were just a couple of them. And so over time, there's in the Gunnison area, there's a cattle game trail in every drainage. And if it's tighter, it's a well-defined trail. As soon as it gets kind of flatter, they braid all over the place. So we were able to, take those and sort of create some trail experiences at Hartman's. And so I was really myself and some others, and this happened all over the world. Fruta happened in that sort of willy-nilly mountain bikers out there doing their own thing fashion. And I was a part of that from the beginning. So the quest for great riding was in, my blood and several other mountain bikers' blood all around the world right away. And that's where that's the genesis of a lot of our riding.
So I'm curious about what you're talking about, things that have already been made by nature, whether it's fall line erosion or the way that animals choose to move through a space. Like there's no, this is like, how does the first society learn language? Like, how do you start to talk to each other? So as new people in this new world with bikes that that you thought were incredibly capable, but now we look back on, that generation of stump jumper and things like that and think like, oh my gosh, I'd never ride one of those things. It's so unsafe. But at the
Again,
time,
I would
like,
never ride it again. I would never
right,
choose
right.
to ride that
Well, at
again.
least
That's all.
maybe like around town or something like
Sure.
that. But
Yeah.
but like you have no language to talk to each other about, like, and you have really only your individually accrued experiences. So how do you start to define what is good trail? Like, is good trail in Gunnison different than good trail in Fruta?
And how do you define that to people who don't even understand like mountain biking as a
Right.
concept? Like, they're like, you ride your bike on dirt? Of course. Who doesn't? That's how we get from X to Z. Like, how do you bridge that gap to people who don't even understand what a mountain bike is?
Well, we weren't really concerned with that. We were just concerned with riding our bikes. And then as other mountain bikers sort of went out and then experienced some of these newer trails, or trails that have been like an old, like along a fence line is where a lot of cattle go. So there's oftentimes there's a fence line trail that gets made, or there's an old double track that somehow gets pushed into a trail. So it was using some pieces that were already there and then linking those up in different ways. But very quickly, mountain bikers started to get more creative and look at, oh, look, that rock formation, and then looking for technical challenges, ups, downs. And then it was, I guess, what a lot of people consider to be flow. And we had a lot of this cattle, for whatever reason, these cattle trails had just this amazing rhythmic back and forth that was just so fun when you're going downhill. And if that's not necessarily the flow state, but that's a flow feel. So I think a lot of times as mountain bikers, we're looking for those two things: a technical challenge, and that can be an up challenge or a down challenge, or even just a flat rock gardening challenge. And then you're looking for that just exhilarating, flowy feeling where the earth is rushing under your tires. And then when you start to roll in, a little bit of that up and down, and you feel the down weighting and the up weighting and the ability, you get a little bit weightless, and then you compress a little bit. And we were able to start to say, that trail was really fun and that trail was not so much fun. What are the elements of that fun trail? And let's try to reproduce that. And again, this happened in a lot of places. And it's still a challenge where, and it's a challenge for advocacy that there are unauthorized, building and unauthorized building going on. And that's where IMBA came along 30 plus years ago and really laid out the blueprint for how you go about engaging land managers to bring trails to your community.
So how did that get into your view? I mean, you're racing professionally, you guys are hunting trail, you're finding things, you're saying, this is what we like, this is what we don't like, this is a thing that works for us, this doesn't. How do we locate these things? How did like IMBA's codifying of trying to figure that out figure into y'all looking at Gunnison as a place? Because it seems like you got deeply involved in your community and said, I want trails where I live, where my friends and I spend time. How do we engage with this community to make those things happen? Because at some point you realize, I'm sure, that just poaching illegal trails and riding, Farmer Jones's cattle trail might get you shot, and that's not a great plan. So like, how does that genesis happen, and in what piece of the timeline for you?
Well, and that was for me, because I got busier with other things, and the trail system was pretty good at that point. There was plenty of riding. So the mid to late 90s, I'm not as engaged in that, but suddenly the trail started to fall apart from a maintenance perspective, because we didn't know about grade reversals, and we didn't really understand the way water worked and how destructive it could be in fall line trails and things like that. And there's plenty of examples still where that trail is not going to be a sustainable trail. So what IMBA did, and those folks that came way before me and the current folks at IMBA, or some of them, we've actually Joey Klein and we've got some guys that go way back.
Joey Klein's been there for a hot minute.
Yeah. So they were the ones that really took it to that next level of, here's what them and others, here's what makes a good trail. And one element of a good trail is sustainability, because that might be a fun trail, but after 3 seasons of rain, it's just a giant rut. And that's where mountain biking really evolved the technical aspects of trails and trail building. That's where grade reversals and all of that came in, to where we suddenly didn't have to build water bars anymore. So then I guess my next trip into the advocacy was maintaining the trails that we had helped create in the Hartman Rocks area. And a lot of times that meant, wow, we've got some serious fall line trails in places. And now we're building, water diversions and water bars. And then you read the IMBA books and you're like, wow, this never should have been built this way in the first place. So there was a deep dive into the technical aspects of trails that IMBA and a lot of people that are in the professional trail building world now, they got their start in IMBA way before I was there. I've come very late to that organization, and so much great work was done on the trail side. But then on the advocacy side, it was engaging land managers in working for access, working for better trails, and how do you get new trails built. And in some places, it was relatively easy. In other places, it's really quite difficult. And we've tried to do some projects in the Gunnison area, and there's not been a ton of new trail built on national forests in Gunnison. But if you go to Prescott, in the forest there, they're doing a lot more building. So on the forest side, district ranger by district ranger varies quite a bit. The BLM has been a lot more open to new trail development, and there's a lot of really good riding on BLM all around the West that was planned projects and professionally built, or a combination of social routes or old school routes and professionally built, put together. But then other places too, where you've got, say, state lands or municipal lands, county lands. Denver's a really good example. The Jefferson County open space, they've got, dozens and dozens of these mountain parks, and they had trails that were for hiking and equestrians in some cases. Then the mountain bike comes along. Jefferson County was very progressive, and they very quickly said, you know what, mountain bikes are cool on most of these trails. There were a few that they left for hikers only. But Jeffco has a long heritage of allowing mountain biking on their trails. And IMBA was part of that in places all around the country. And where there were access challenges, IMBA would get involved. And what oftentimes the stories that I hear are the local advocates, the local mountain bikers go to the local land managers, and they really can't get through to them. But as soon as they brought IMBA in, and the land managers realized there was this national organization and this body of knowledge that had been created, then they really changed their tune and started to pay more attention to the local advocates. And in so many cases, those local advocates were doing fantastic work, and they were bringing trails back that had been lost. The mountain bikers went out, and this is still happening in places where old Forest Service trails, they're on the maps, but they're long gone with deadfall. But underneath all that, the trail is still there, and the mountain bikers, went in there and have brought that trail back. But mountain bikers have certainly been the driving force in trail development, trail technology, if you want to call it that.
For sure.
The evolution of trails. And the trails have gotten so good in our sport of mountain biking. It really only takes two things. It takes great bikes and great trails. And the industry is making phenomenal bikes right now, and the trails are pretty much there. They're just not there everywhere.
Yeah.
They're in places. And, Northwest Arkansas is a really good example. Now, Arkansas and Northwest Arkansas has had a long heritage of mountain biking, but once the Walton family really started to build, trails in a big way down there, it really put that area on the map. And that was to address the quality of life, make the quality of life there better, to attract and retain a quality workforce. It just so happened to also be a phenomenal, draw for visitors too. And so many people go to Bentonville to visit. And I'm not sure that was front of mind in what their strategy was. It was, hey, let's make this a great place to live. It just happens to be a really great place to visit too, if you're a mountain biker or a trail user.
We were talking about that today.
Yeah. So you mentioned something in there, and I think it goes back to your pro career, because you're talking about the mid '90s, and you were a little busy winning a lot of bike races and traveling across the world, and participating very, very seriously in mountain bike racing during kind of the first boon of tons of money coming into the sport, and tons of growth and tons of development and all of this stuff. And then as you start to cycle out and come back to advocacy. I've been thinking about this all day and trying to think about how to ask it. But so you had experience with Gunnison Trails, and you've outlined a lot of the challenges that we're going to talk about with Common Grounds here shortly. But you had experience kind of all politics is local and all trails are local, and building and maintaining your local trails for you and your friends. And then you go off and you see the world and you experience the highest level. You help build the course for Atlanta, and the Olympian in your house goes and performs very well on your track. I think there's probably a reason for that. I'm not going
Yeah.
to say that you built a course for her, but I'm also not saying that. But so you go and you do all of these things, and you get involved in so many different facets of the kind of world of bike racer training, running a team, and managing your own time, and being an advocate, and then coming back to the advocacy space. And I've been struggling with how to frame this, but when you started to walk, slowly away from being a bike racer and walk back into this advocacy world, were the people that were welcoming you, I'm sure, with open arms, thinking like, oh, well, Dave's going to solve all of our problems. He's ridden his bike everywhere. He's seen all of these different things. Like there's not going to be anybody that knows more than Dave coming back to this world, whether it's IMBA specifically or just like advocating for trails locally. Like, did you run into that? Was it like people just got out of your way and let you kind of have carte blanche on decisions, or did you kind of just like walk into the space and kind of just fill in gaps where you saw that there were gaps?
Well, it depended on the audience, and there's a certain element that doesn't care about all of that, and they're concerned with wildlife issues, or they're land managers, and a legacy of bike racing really doesn't mean much to them. You're just a mountain biker to them.
Right.
I did get quite a bit of when we got a chance to do, say, a reroute. We did a lot of reroutes out at Hartman Rocks. We didn't get to build a lot of new trails, but we get to do some pretty phenomenal reroutes. And then when it came time to lay a trail out, people would go, well, Dave, you're the expert. You can do this. And I had gone to, and even before that, I recognized that I really wasn't an expert compared to the men and women who were doing the trail, like Joey Klein. Like, that's an expert. That's someone. Rich Edwards. There's a whole bunch of these Aaron Rodgers with Rock Solid. There's a Greg Mazu, Tony Boone. There's a whole list of these folks who had really, when I had immersed myself in bike racing, so I was a pretty good bike racer. Well, they had immersed themselves in trails, and they were true professionals. I mean, they've forgotten about, more than I know about trails, but people would just say, oh, Dave, you're an expert, you can do this. And I never wanted to lay a trail out alone. And I still don't like to lay a trail out alone. I like to lay trails out, with a committee, because the buy-in is better, the trail's better. We've laid out some pretty fun trails at Hartman's, as reroutes that were long, tough processes where 5 or 6 of us worked together to get the alignment just right. But those other folks, they don't really look at a racing legacy as anything. Now, some of the sort of the business interests in the community saw trails as being something that could potentially bring some vitality, and we've seen that in a lot of places. Cuyuna, Minnesota, Duluth, Minnesota. Those are a couple of great examples of early adopters to trails that have really had, a pretty profound impact on those communities that had a sort of a different, economic driver at one time, and they lost that driver, like Cuyuna with the iron ore, and then this new outdoor rec comes along. So just depending on who you talk to, I was received differently, and but there's definitely those folks that they almost look at you and what you're doing as, we really don't want this here.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating to see that, like, our sport, right? Our sport, the thing we think is the most important thing in the world, it's bikes. We love bikes. Bikes are the most important thing in the world for so many people, right? This is just our perspective. It doesn't even register for other people sometimes, that like they're like, you did what? You're the
Yeah,
what
it's like
champion
you
of
said
the
earlier,
where?
like people ride bikes on that. Like it's like understanding that that's the underpinning for a lot of people. I think it could help people go a long way in terms of understanding, to your point, kind of the like, what crowd are you walking into?
Yeah.
Yeah, but as a mountain biker, you know this, that when you're heading out for a ride and maybe you're solo or with another person and it's kind of stormy, and you go out and you just have, almost an out of body experience, right? It's just amazing. And then, but you see, there's people looking at you like, what's that knucklehead doing?
Yeah.
That you go out and ride your bike. And so what did you do? And where'd you go? Well, I didn't really go anywhere. I just kind of went out, went out to Hartman's or whatever your local trail system is. And you put the trails together in a certain way and you did whatever you did and you came back and you're like, that was awesome. But you can't explain that to somebody. They're not going to get that.
Yeah.
What,
But I think it's humbling to some extent that you think of it that way. Instead, I think there are people who wouldn't approach it that way. They would say, hey, look here, look at all my plaques on the wall. This is the things I've done. You should respect my opinion in this space. But I appreciate that you look at it as, hey, I have this experience. This is the silo of the experience that I have. But here is the other people who have this. I'm going to take their information and I'm going to use the information I have and be part of this process and be part of doing this thing in my local community or whatever. And I think it builds a roadmap for people to think about how they approach being engaged in their communities, because we all approach this from a different perspective, whether we are Joey Klein or Dave Wiens or John Woolry or Doug McClintock, right? We all approach this with a different perspective, and it's all valid. And it can weigh importantly on building something good in your community, whatever it is, because you have your perspective, but it's getting all those people to the table. So as you learn through these processes and you're doing this stuff and you're engaged in advocacy, whether it's with Gunnison or whether it's starting to look at bigger things, do you like the work, the process, or do you like the finished piece of it? What drives you to be doing these things? Like, are you motivated by putting the process together?
Yeah, and it's different. What I'm doing at IMBA now is different than what I did with Gunnison Trails. And really that, I started Gunnison Trails in 2006. We didn't have an advocacy organization in Gunnison. Crested Butte is the oldest mountain biking association on the planet. They'd been up the road in Crested Butte forever, but Gunnison just never had anything, even though the Hartman Rock system came along and was a pretty good system. And I had, I'm one of those people that can see potential. And I saw potential in three places. Hartman's is southwest of Gunnison. I saw potential in the Signal Peak area northeast of Gunnison. I saw potential northwest of Gunnison. And I also noticed that between Gunnison and Crested Butte, there are uninterrupted public lands and that we could connect those two communities with a backcountry single track. So that's what got me fired up, is when I was kind of done racing. I'm like, let's, Gunnison Trails, we're going to start this process and we're going to go through the process and we're going to build these three, these two systems in this one, iconic point-to-point trail. And real quickly, you realize, well, we got to maintain what we got, because you can't even have a conversation with a land manager or anybody else unless you're taking care of what you have. Because you go in there and you go, hey, we're, new trails. They're like, how are the trails you have now? Are they in good shape? And a lot of them weren't. So we just tripled down and that set the course of what Gunny Trails was. And a lot of organizations are the same in order of priority: maintain, educate, build. So we're maintaining first, we're educating trail users second. And the easiest example of that is we've got seasonal closures for the Gunnison sage-grouse, a listed animal. We can't use these trails, guys, between March 15th and May 15th. Those regulations were universally disregarded, primarily by mountain bikers, but also by moto users and others. Until Gunny Trails, we kind of got a campaign going, and we added some emails, and we have a race called the Growler, and people from the Front Range, Denbury, come and they descend on Gunnison while that closure is still in place. So we let those people know, hey, if you're coming to Gunnison, it's really important. You can ride 2/3 of the course, but you can't ride the course south of the power lines. Help us here. This is really important. We went from almost no compliance to I'd go out there and look, and there's not a track going into those areas. So that's the education piece, or one example of education. And then the new building, that's the fun stuff. That's the visionary stuff. That requires a lot of work. And so of those three things, we're only moving on Signal Peak, and we've built, 10 or 15 miles of brand new trail up there in the last couple of years. It took 11 years from, the vision and really introducing the idea to land managers, to when we first put the shovel in the ground. So there was 11 years of not constant toil, but you're chipping away at this process, and that's a lot of time. Some people don't have that kind of time or patience, but now we're to the point where it's happening. 11 years is pretty long, but there's probably some folks out there listening that can talk about a longer term than that. Shorter.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you got two on this call.
I was
yeah.
gonna say, yeah, we got 20 here for just a couple miles of trail. But I think it's important to hear. Kent said it when he was on last year. We've talked about it locally with a lot of our trails. You're talking about it with your trails, because I think that there's a misconception that I have an idea. I want to build a trail in my local pocket park. I'm gonna have it done by next spring. And getting people to kind of understand that the wheels of government and red tape and things like that grind very slowly, and to make sure that you're doing it the right way so it is sustainable. Are there any local trails already that are hiking trails in your local pocket park? And are they being maintained? And what does the budget look like for the local park system? And how, maneuvering all of those things, there's so many moving pieces to all of these things that I don't think people give credence to, or think that, well, I'm super motivated, or, I know somebody in the parks department or something like that, and we can make it happen. And it's that's unrealistic. And there are projects like that do happen. So those are always the ones that people point to. But I feel like what you're talking about in terms of having so much time proving, proof of concept of we have a community here that's willing to engage. We have a community here that's willing to educate themselves and kind of move the needle in terms of kind of moving the goalpost to what land managers need and expect. And then you can have the privilege of moving forward. It's like you don't walk in on the first day of your job at McDonald's and be like, I'm gonna be a regional manager. Can you make me a regional manager? I could probably do that job. No, you gotta go learn how to make the fries, and then you gotta go learn how to make the burgers, and then you become a store manager. All of those individual processes along the way. And I think it's good for people to have multiple kind of data points from Ohio, Colorado, California, wherever, just to see that, man, this trail in my area is taking so long to get done, and we're running into all these issues. And that's kind of how things work.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ken probably talked about what we've at times called, the trail building ecosystem, or the pathway, the journey, whatever. When you start with a vision and then you go into access, okay, we actually need, if we know where we want to put it, and we're certain that these will make good trails, we need permission to put it there.
Yeah.
Right.
And then a plan. A lot of those trails that we're talking about from yesteryear, there was no planning. It was one trail, then it was another trail, and then another trail.
There was some cows. They made those trails for you. You didn't
Right.
make those trails. Cows didn't have a plan. They didn't get together and be like, hey guys, let's walk over here.
But
Right.
Fun fact that we learned tonight from Dave Wiens himself: the cows have flow.
Cows got flow.
What they don't always have is the grade reversal thing. The cow trails.
You got to work on that, cows. You got to work on your grade reversals. You got flow,
cows.
no grade reversals.
Step 2 of the process, cows: educate.
They don't like going uphill. But one thing that I think about, and at IMBA, I like to think that I think like a land manager, and that's because that was who I was schooled under, were the folks at the BLM who I worked really closely with, and the Forest Service to a lesser extent. Because if you go in there like mountain biking trails, they're like, great, here's all the things that we have to consider when we do this. And that was the travel planning process, the forest process, the Gunnison sage grouse candidate conservation agreement. It's an endangered species agreement that I got very involved in forming. Ultimately, I mean, the best lessons that I learned were from IMBA and from the land managers I worked with, and they were really helpful in this process. And a couple in particular that they wanted us to be successful, and they said, this is what you have to do if you want this project to actually happen. So a big part of that is planning. And that's something that IMBA, we underscore, with a really thick Sharpie, is planning is so important now. And it's hard to even move forward at all without a great plan. So vision, You need to have, and sometimes you're not going to get the access without the plan. So these things it's not like this perfect sequence. There's a lot of, some back and forth that can happen. Funding is a big deal. I mean, volunteers building 25 miles of fantastic trail, might happen in a few places, but there's a whole trail building industry now building phenomenal trails. And, the thing about mountain bike clubs and Gunny Trails was no different. $10,000. Wow, that's a ton of money. Where are we going to get that from? You go to a municipality or a county or a state, they're building ice rinks and skate parks and ball fields. And you talk about some 6-figure sums and you get into the 7 figures. And they're like, yeah, we build stuff like that. And this is dirt infrastructure, or maybe it's asphalt infrastructure in the case of an asphalt pump track or something like that. And this is important to our community. And absolutely, we're willing to spend that kind of money. And again, Northwest Arkansas, Minnesota, there's examples all around the country of these trail systems that are professionally built. They're not cheap and they're fantastic. And what they provide those communities in different ways, whether it's tourism or something for the locals or a little bit of both, getting people outdoors, it's phenomenally valuable. And trails appeal to a much larger cross set of people than pickleball courts. I mean, that's a great thing, but it's pretty narrow. Skate park is great for kids. Rec centers, serve some people, swimming pool. And trails are really wide. And if you have a blank canvas and you're able to put a trail system down that covers all the bases, dog walkers are covered, hikers are covered. There's great trail running there. There's fantastic mountain biking. There's a bunch of family-friendly beginner mountain biking, and there's some double black diamonds that I won't even think about riding, and everything in between. I mean, that's the kind of systems that we're talking about now, and that are really starting to pop up in places around the country. And I think that's really the future of trails close to where people live. Now you can, if you have enough real estate, you could have just some parks for hiking and running, and then just some parks for mountain biking.
Sure.
Everybody gets a little bit of what they're looking for.
I think that's interesting, because I think this is kind of where, like, we're heading locally here in Cincinnati. So for people who don't know, in Cincinnati, we have you got to use all the caveats to get it right. Mount Airy Forest is the largest urban managed forest in the nation. It's like 1,600 acres. It's pretty large, and it's 5 minutes out of downtown, right? And it took 20 years to finally let mountain bikers attempt to build trail there. And now there's things moving, but it's a very heavily used park by trail runners and hikers and all of these folks, right? I think this is the piece that I know we want to get to tonight, which is trails are common ground. And this is a big new initiative that you're working on. And I think it brings all of these things together. It brings the understanding what your local community is doing, where your local user groups are, the people that are engaged, whether it's the land managers or whoever, and says, hey, how can we all get around using our trails? Can you tell us a little bit about Trails Are Common Ground, and where the genesis for the idea of building a group that focuses on bringing users together of disparate use perspectives comes to make the community focus on building trails that are, whether they're separate or combined, but are like a larger aspect of the community? Where did this idea come from, and how did this genesis happen?
I'm sure that people have talked about this before, but when we really started talking about it was, the pandemic forced the stay-at-home orders, and we were hearing about, just overcrowded trails, and, so many people have been pushed outdoors. That was the one thing you could do. People were digging their bikes out of their basements, their old mountain bikes, or they were buying up the supply in shops, or they were walking or trail running. And, there was a lot more conflict we were hearing about. So we just were trying to think of, what can we do? Is there something that we can do? And so we thought about, gathering all the trail users together to form a movement of sorts. And so at IMBA, we brought this movement together, but it isn't something that IMBA owns, or that we're, above. It's, we're just one of the logos down there, along with, the Backcountry Horsemen of America, the American Trail Running Association, and lots of other organizations. We're just part of the coalition. And what we came away from is, okay, what's our goal? What's our number one goal? It's that everybody that goes out on trails has the best possible experience. And that's from a dog walker to a hiker to a trail runner to a mountain biker to an equestrian. And we went right into motos. And we really, we went back and forth about this early. We can't leave anybody out because everybody uses trails. And we really need to acknowledge everybody's right to use trails in the means that they want to use trails. And so that means that there are trails for motorcycles. And where I live, we've got a ton of motorized trails. Harmon Rocks is motorized. There's guys out there and women on motos all the time. And in the Cement Creek area of Crested Butte, lots of motorized trails. They're certainly not everywhere. And in some places, motorized trails and motorcycles motorcycles aren't allowed. In some places there's more equestrian use. And so it gets assembled differently all the time, but the goal is everybody has a great experience. How do we make sure that happens? And the first thing we came up with was, we just really need to triple down on etiquette and education. There's maybe some existing trail users that need reminders. There's a whole lot of brand new users that really could benefit from knowing exactly what to do there. And there's going to be new users, hopefully, for a long time. And part of the premise is trail-based recreation is a good thing, and it's positive for people to do this. We don't want to discourage it. We want to encourage it. But we're talking about, in a lot of cases, narrow trails, and the more people you put in narrow trails, the more challenges that you have. So that education piece, we also said we don't want to be the trail police. We know that no one likes to be told what to do. So what should we do? And the group said, hey, let's lead with kindness. If you're going to remember one thing, just be kind out there. Okay, but very quickly, we also talked about empathy. The empathy is important toward other user groups. If you're a mountain biker and you're looking at the hiker, go, hey, I don't get hiking. I'm not a hiker, but it's totally cool. I totally respect that person. Same for the hiker looking back toward the mountain biker or the equestrian or whatever. It's that empathy, the awareness on trails. Don't just walk out onto a trail and lose your mind. I mean, it's a little bit like driving a car. There's a certain amount of attention you need to give what you're doing, regardless of what you're doing, because you're sharing it with other users and you're impacting your experience and others too. So that awareness is really important. And then it goes to actually having specific knowledge. And that having that knowledge becomes more acute depending on what you're doing. It's more important for a mountain biker to have that knowledge than a runner or a hiker, just because they're traveling at faster speeds. If you're an equestrian user, it's really important that you have an understanding of what you have with a horse and what you may encounter and what you're going to do in those situations. And the same with motos. So
is this any different than road use, right? Like you have cars, bikes, pedestrians, right? You've got all these different users that are utilizing the roadways and the crosswalks and this space, right? Do we need to adopt the same thought that granted, not everyone has adopted this thought, to be very clear, but this needs to be our process, right? Everyone belongs here. How do you use this land? How do you steward it? And how do you react to each other in a measured, appropriate way?
Yeah, and responsibility is a key part of that. So it's being responsible for actually the trail use and your encounters with other users, and then the landscape too, and the wildlife and the soils. And so there's the whole ecological and conservation side too that we have to pay attention to. But no, I think if more people just took it a little more serious about when they went on trails, it would create a better environment, particularly in busy places. So that's that etiquette responsibility side. Very quickly, the group said, hey, we need to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion too. This is really important because right now there are communities who are underrepresented on trails. You don't see a lot of Black and brown people on trails. You don't see a lot of disabled or adaptive users on trails. Or when you do, they're the ones that actually there's a physical appearance that has them standing apart from the crowd. And what we hear is, I don't see a lot of people that look like me in the outdoors or on trails. So it was very important that we needed to address DE&I. We need to make trails welcoming and safe for all people, particularly the BIPOC community and the adaptive users, and create safe spaces and break down barriers, and acknowledging that those barriers do exist. So the DE&I work is challenging, but we've just assembled a task force. In fact, we had our first Zoom call today. Got a fantastic group assembled to work on the DE&I portion of this. And we're really excited about the possibilities that Trails Our Common Ground have to move the needles to diversify our trails. And success here looks like just, if you snap a shot of a trailhead, you're going to see all kinds of people there. And everyone feels welcome and safe, and they're mountain biking and they're hiking and they're riding horses and motos. And there is no, I'd like to do that, but I don't see any people like me out there. So that is only going to happen if we can make that slow, steady progress to where in, a certain amount of time, we've added, those folks that have been underrepresented to trails to where it's not even a thing anymore. That's what we're striving for on that side. And then the third pillar of Trails Our Common Ground is just what can we do to innovate trails or in the planning process to raise the experience level of all users and decrease the opportunities for conflict. And there's some examples all around the country of this. One we like to use is the Corner Canyon system in Draper City, Utah. IMBA, helped plan this system 10 or 15 years ago. And there's pockets of hiker, runner only that also is open to horses. There's not a ton of horse use there. Likewise, there's directional mountain biking trails. Certainly there's the multiple use trails in between that might flow both directions where we need to pay attention and be more careful. There's some trails that are directional for mountain bikes. Mountain bikes can only go up. Other users can go both ways, but we don't want to go up because you know what? It takes us to a place where we can choose from, 3 or 4 fantastic bike only, bike optimized directional trails that we can use to go down. So there's ways we can put trail systems together. And particularly when we get that blank canvas opportunity to do that, where for whatever reason, hey, here's 200 acres, here's 500 acres, here's 5,000 acres. We can do a trail system here. What should we do on it? Well, let's get that community together. Let's talk to the community. Let's find out what the community does. How much hiking and walking is there? Who's walking their dogs? Where do the people live adjacent to the community? Is there a mountain biking community? Of course there is. Are people riding horses? We need to know all those things so we can assemble the best possible. Just imagine the sort of, the best possible trail system for all users where you can roll up to a parking lot. And as mountain bikers, we know we can go get the experience we're looking for. And a hiker can go get an experience they're looking for. And a trail runner, granted, this isn't going to work everywhere. And no, is going to be slow, but we're going to start to put these systems on the ground in places. And in some places, it might be a renovation. It could be what you're talking about. Here's an existing system of social trails, or this is a really old system of trails. That land manager and that community is progressive enough, and you can get them to say, okay, we're willing to take a chance on this. Let's renovate this system. And a renovation could mean some mountain bikers going, you know what? We're not going to be able to ride those trails anymore. But look what we get over here. We actually get some directional trails where we can let go of the brakes and not worry about it. And I was talking to a friend of IMBA, and she lives in a very busy Western community with a busy trail system. And she said, and she's a hiker, she's not even a mountain biker. She says, Dave, on my morning walk, and I walk every morning, I'm getting off the trail 100 to 150 times. And my husband is a mountain biker. And all he wants is one trail where he can just let go of his brakes and ride kind of fast and not worry about what's hanging out around every single corner.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. And as mountain bikers, we've all experienced the hikers. Like, I'm coming up on some hikers here, and you're 100 feet or more behind them. You're probably going their speed, and you either ring your bell or you say, hey, and they jump out of their skin, thinking that you're just bearing down on them. Those are, I don't like, I always get bummed when I see that the hikers and the runners are on pins and needles out there. That's not why you go to the trails. You go for a relaxing experience. So it's kind of finding that compromise between being aware, but not being frightened on the trails. And so there's certain things that we can do, we believe, to bring people together, and through that education, getting more people from all different walks of life on the trails, and then some certain things that we can do as we plan trails and put them together that will raise the experience of all users and lower the opportunities for conflict.
Well, and I think you're talking about like some of these experiences. We're talking, getting off the trail that many times, or riding the brakes as a mountain bike user. It's almost like an abundance of like those are all great things. Like, it's an embarrassment
Abundance
of
riches.
Yeah,
Abundance of riches.
it's an embarrassment of riches for the outdoor community, and it kind of leads me to this question, Dave. Is do you think, and you know the timing, and we haven't talked about like the specific timing of like when all of this kind of kicked off, and how some of the initial conversations happened, but like there's so many people. Just talking about USAC in our intro, is USAC has had tons of conversation about how do we, the bike community, take advantage of the bike boom, and the fact that all these people are now on bikes, and how do we convert them to lifelong cyclists, and I think so many outdoor activity folks are looking at it in this way. But again, as we kind of talked in the intro, this is something to you that's local. Yes, you are part of a national organization, but from where you sit, this is how you can affect something locally to convert those people that, even if they don't necessarily need to be mountain bikers, but if they just decided to go on their first hike in their local park, how do we keep them? How do we keep their experience exciting? How do we make them happy and make that experience rich for them? So does this, I feel like the timing of where this was going to happen is probably without COVID-19. This is at least 5-10 years down the road for this to happen, for hikers and runners and mountain bikers to all get together and kind of come to the same conclusion that a lot of us individually have had, of like, we all want the same thing. We all want awesome trails, and we all want to
Yeah, but that's been a
them.
hard sell, John, to your point. That's been a hard sell, and I
Correct.
appreciate you saying that. It's been
Correct.
a hard sell.
And because everyone has their unique, like, I want this as a hiker. When I go on a hike with my wife, it's a very different experience than when Doug and I go mountain biking. And when I go on a trail run, it's a different experience again from what I expect from hiking and mountain biking. So it's a hard sell. So without the pandemic, I guess my question is, like, does this happen at the pace that it's happening at?
Certainly not at the pace, but trail use was already really starting to tick up. I mean, people were coming around to trails, and that does include, I mean, there's been a bike boom, but there's also been a hiking boom and a trail running boom and a moto boom. I mean, you know, motorcycles have been, off-road dirt bikes have been flying off the shelves as well. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Anything that has to do with the outdoors is, I mean, motorboats and, you know, fishing gear and all that stuff. So
yeah, you're farther away from people. Let's be clear. What we've all learned is stay far away from other human beings, if we've learned anything at all.
Well, but that too, but I also think that a lot of people were pushed outside. They saw what was out there and they liked it. And they said, "Hey, I want this in my life." Like we accelerated what a lot of us already knew. Hey, the outdoors is pretty awesome, and it makes you a happier person, makes you a little bit healthier. A lot more people came around to that because of the pandemic. The pandemic definitely pushed that, but we were already heading in that direction, on a number of fronts. But certainly that pushed huge numbers out there that otherwise wouldn't have. But, you know, these kinds of things have been on my mind for a while, is, you know, the challenges of, I know when I rode up in Minnesota, I think it was Cuyuna, and there's a trail that's a bi-directional trail to get to the trails, and it was scary to ride. It was, and I'm not used to riding where there's that many people. Gunnison's we're kind of in the hinterlands. And it was the blind spots but they say, hey, caution, go slow on this one because we do. And then when I got on the directional trails out there, you could relax and you could ride. I mean, that was 5 years ago. That was before the pandemic. So this has actually been going on for a long time. So it just, you know, it certainly was accelerated by the pandemic. But whether or not it would have happened without the pandemic, I can't tell you.
Sure.
But,
I think we would have gotten there. I think it just would have taken longer. I mean, we're having these conversations here locally, and we've been trying to have these conversations, right? But it's certainly a push or pull depending on who's been here longer in the community and who holds the sway and who has the political whatever, right?
Or who thinks that they hold,
or who thinks that they do, right? All of those things are challenging because we're all kind of competing for the same sort of resources to some extent. And I think that thinking about this is where we're putting our flag. Everybody should be part of this conversation. Everyone should find a space where they can exist. We all need to work together. This is measurably better for all of us if we're all speaking the same language and headed down the same road at a general level. Where do you guys put measurables? What is success for trails or common ground? Like what are you staking out there as like, when we hit that, that's a goal. That's a step.
Yeah, no, that's a challenging element of it, and we certainly don't have that completely defined, especially on the etiquette and the education side. Those are difficult things to measure. Somehow, if you're measuring, a reduced, numbers of trail conflicts or
Yeah,
something
you
like
can't
that.
just like do number of handshakes on this ride.
Number
I
of high
had.
fives, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right. And on the DEI side, I think there's certainly things that we can, if it's, I don't know if it's going to be a specific measurement or if it's going to just be, sort of an anecdotal feeling that things are improving along those lines. But with the innovative trail systems, if we can see more places like Corner Canyon or some of the systems that are going onto the ground up in the upper Midwest, where there are some directional mountain biking trails and then some hikers only. I mean, IMBA, we're doing this fantastic system near Chattanooga. It's only 200 acres, but it's got some hiking only. It's got a fantastic couple of climbing trails and 4 phenomenal descending trails at the top of this property. It's only 200 acres, but it felt enormous. There's fantastic bouldering and there's little bouldering trails for folks to get in there. So it's just this, I think we're going to start to see more and more of these progressive systems on the landscape that do sort of check the boxes for everybody. And once people go to those and ride those or walk those or run those, whatever it may be, they're going to say, we'd like one of these in our community. And we'll start to get some press for these kinds of places as there's more and more. I mean, there's places that are really challenging in Southern California. I think I talked about them earlier. There's some places where it's just crazy. And if we can start to see some progress or see some examples, case studies, whatever it is of people who are doing innovative things to try to address, it's not just we need to get rid of that user group or that user group. It's, hey, let's think about how we can do this. And we do need to measure the experience going up for all users, and then the number of conflicts hopefully going down. But to answer your question, no, we don't have a specific mechanism in place for metrics, but certainly something that we'll be working on, because we know how important that is to be able to say, yes, we were successful, and here's the data that shows that.
Yeah.
Hard thing to measure how happy everyone is, or how people are not angry with people, right? And everybody's feeling good. I think you can look at things on the ground. That's important, but I think you're right. It is a tough thing to measure.
So if somebody's, because I know you guys are, it's one group of people. It's, IMBA is what IMBA is, and it only has insights into people that either come directly to it or establish relationships that are already there. So if folks are in their neighborhood or in their region and struggling to figure out how to navigate some of these decisions and some of these conversations, or if they've already made contact with local running groups, local, hiking groups, local equestrian groups, and they're looking for where to go, how can they get in contact with you and get kind of connected to a little bit more brain power to help put some of these, put some pen to paper and figure out how to navigate some of these questions?
You bet. And that's, they just need to reach out to IMBA. And I don't know if you guys have some liner notes or anything, but, you feel free to put my email in there. And if I can't help somebody directly, I'm happy to direct them. But that's the space that we really work in. And we don't feel like there's many others, if any, working in it, which is helping people navigate that whole process from vision to when you're finally, sticking that shovel in the ground to either build or renovate your trails. Like there's communities that have it dialed and they're high functioning, and Comba here, the Colorado Mountain Bike Association, and Boulder Mountain Bike Alliance, they're high functioning. They're good at what they do. They don't need a ton of help with that. But there's other parts of the country, other organizations that are like, hey, we want trails, and even communities that don't have a mountain biking organization. Where do we start? And IMBA can be a resource for that. It's something that that's the part of the process where we really want to focus on, is that whole area, which is, how do you get the access? Where are you going to get your funding? Do you have a plan? There's a whole big world in there. And, like I said, 11 years here, and you guys are going on 20, and you're probably, dealing with basically those issues in a lot of cases. That access piece, it's not as simple as just the land manager saying yes. You need to have that community will. bringing the community on board. There's more opposition for trail systems now than there used to be.
There's always the lady at the town hall. There's always that one lady.
There's always one of them. Always somebody at the town hall.
Yeah, indeed. And so the more that you can do that community engagement up front, and even then, even when you think that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and you're good to go, then something else happens, and you almost have to expect it. And we certainly see instances of that. But more and more, if you really create that strong coalition with a lot of different cross sections of your community to come together to advance it, and it takes what we call trail champions. You can draw a line back to a trail champion in a lot of cases. That one or two, or in some cases, 3 people who really were the key drivers of that project forward. And a lot of times they weren't just sort of sledgehammer people. They're diplomatic and they're honest. Trust is really important. If you lose trust in any way along the process, a lot of times, that can be a fatal flaw, at least for that iteration. So there's a lot of important elements of bringing people together and moving, collectively forward in a very positive way to get into where, when you do, show up and it's time to build, hopefully you get to continue to do it, and you don't have some of those voices at the 11th hour that can come out and derail a project. And we're seeing that now and then it happens, but certainly we know that the having trails in a community is just fantastic. It makes that community happier, healthier. It makes the community more prosperous, and anything we can do to help communities get to that point. And there's a fantastic professional trail building industry out there, but IMBA works almost in front of that to get to that point where you're ready to have that, to have those professionals do that work. And we've got a database of close to 400 communities that we're working with and tracking to try to help them realize trails. And it's a tough process, and everyone's dealing with something that's just a little bit different. And we may or may not have the perfect answers for every communities, but a lot of that is sort of, creating learning communities where they can learn from each other. And there's a lot of communities out there that are happy to talk about their journey with trails and what they did, how they were successful. What did you do with, that particular situation? So the more we can connect people and create those case studies and those examples, and really get people excited about the process. I know it's tough, but all it takes is going someplace and riding great trails that one community did finally realize, for you to go home and go, hey, I've ridden it, I've seen it, I've walked it, I've run it. We can do that here. We can do this, and we want to be a resource to help keep moving that forward.
I think that's one of the wonderful things that IMBA has always built itself as and has consistently doubled down on, is it's a resource for people to understand and share information, whether it's chapter to chapter, community to community, the organization on down, or the community on up to the organization. And I think that is where, that's how Trails for Common Ground really ends up becoming a thing, because you're starting to broaden that community. And it's not just the mountain bikers, who we know were the ones that figured out trail science, right? We know mountain bikers figured out trail science. Sorry, trail builders, U.S. Forest Service, BLM, everybody's adopted mountain biking trail building, right? Because we didn't have access. And I think it's awesome that the thought process from IMBA and with Trails for Common Ground is saying, hey, let's get back to what really is important. Is we had to fight for this access. We had to try to get to this place, and we recognize that we all belong here. And that's powerful, because that is really it. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, what you're doing, what you're wanting to recreate. Trails do belong for everyone, and we all need to be invested in trying to make that happen in our community, because it lifts us all up.
Absolutely. And you're right. Trails are powerful, and say mountain bikers were instrumental in bringing a bunch of trails to a community. And if we just dropped a bunch of mountain biking trails on the ground, then we can't be surprised when that guy's walking up the jump line with his poodle and the latte every single morning.
Right, for sure. I'm hitting poodle and latte guy 6 times out of 10 for sure.
it's important for us to the walkers, the runners, they're not out there championing new trail development, but if we bring them with us, bring their experience with us, we're all going to be more successful, because they do all love the trails once they're on the ground. And I heard that with a lot of the conversations, particularly the trail runners. They're like, oh no, we love you guys. You guys build us all kinds of trails. I'm like, well, you guys could help a little bit. I don't mean help in a roll up your sleeves and show up for trail work. I mean, that's great too, and there are plenty of trail runners that do that, but
Sure.
Help us get involved in the vision process, and then the hard work of convincing our electeds and our land managers that we can do something absolutely phenomenal here, and it's going to check all these different boxes in a very a high quality manner. So join us on this journey, I think, is really going to be helpful, because then that finished product at the end has a little something for everybody, and it probably ultimately will include better mountain biking because of that.
And
for sure. 100%.
And I love that this story kind of starts with the mountain bikers and I like that we talk about them as like this amorphic thing.
This weird amorphous thing that is not the three of us. Yeah. Okay, fine.
The mountain biking community just scratching and clawing and begging just to sit at the adult table and be heard, not even necessarily get a plate, but just to be heard and acknowledge that you exist. But now with this through line of Trails for Common Ground, it's completely flipped to where IMBA has positioned itself at the front with all of these other groups in tow, saying like, no, we've been doing a lot of the work on this, and we've literally written the Bible on how to do this correctly. So let's all get on board so we can have more trails for everybody. And it's so interesting to think that, we had this conversation about it could take 5, 10, 15, 20 years to get your trails done. And IMBA's been around for, shade over 30 years. And just to think that how the dynamic has changed nationally for trail access for everybody, but also trail access for mountain bikers, and how mountain bikers have positioned themselves kind of in the zeitgeist around as leaders in this field of how do we maintain trails? How do we keep them successful? How do we keep them well maintained? How do we provide access for everybody? And also, how do we just be cooler to everybody? Like, that's kind of the underpinnings of everything that I hear you say is talking about empathy and compassion and leading with having everybody have a great experience. It's like all of that stuff is just being a better person, but putting it down on paper and being the one to take leadership is like, that's checking the box every step of the way for the way that mountain bikes have engaged in this process from start to finish. So I think it's interesting that it's like there was a group way out in front and mountain bikers were off the back being like, hey, slow down. And now we're like off the front just chugging away like you dropped Lance in Leadville.
Oh, good. Bringing it back. Oh, yeah. Everyone's like, just go.
No, it's a really, I think it's a really positive evolution of trails. And mountain bikers have led a lot of that. Like you say, the technology. And if we can build the kinds of trails now that mountain bikers, really good mountain bikers go, good job, that's a fantastic trail, we can certainly build and plan fantastic hiking and trail running trails. And there's expertise on the equestrian side when that comes into play. So it's really just advancing trails, to continue to do that. But now we're kind of looking at it at the system level, because the trail itself, we've advanced them. Not that it's not going to happen anymore, but how we assemble them is really what we're talking about in a lot of cases here.
Yeah, more holistic, larger perspective, and I think that's powerful and awesome. Dave, this has been excellent. I am so stoked about what you guys have going on and what's happening. So, first off, thank you for being here for this, and coming on to talk about your history in this space and what you got happening right now.
No, and thanks for having me and shining a light on this, and many thanks out there to the mountain biking community, the greater trail using community, because we all have this passion, we all understand this. I mean, trails are kind of like you either get it or you don't, and that includes runners and hikers.
Sure.
I mean, and it's really important, and it makes us better people. And so it just stands to reason that we've got to do everything we can, to try to continue to advance trails. And as the world becomes busier and our lives become busier, then the trails are only more valuable. and it's only gonna continue to go that way. So it's important work, and it's great work, and it takes everyone out there to help bring it along and get involved locally. There's a lot that people can do to help move this forward. And of course, if you're going to remember one thing from this conversation, be kind.
I like that. That's a good thing. No, we
it beat us to it. Normally
he hasn't gotten there because he doesn't know necessarily. So we got to pay some bills, Dave, but we're going to ask you a question, which you want people to take from it. And you can't use be kind because you already used that. So that one was your freebie, but you got to come up with something else after we pay the bills here. So hang tight. We'll ask you the last question. So as we wrap the show today, thanks to everybody for being here. Thanks for all listening, engaging, being with us at TGL. Y'all are amazing. Without all of y'all, we could not do this. We would not be here. We could not continue bringing this to you every other week now. In addition to supporting this fine show with all of your ears and your financial support, we could not do this without our partners. So be sure to slide on over to them and help them out, show them some love so they can keep supporting this show as you do.
And the first one is Be Free Ride Bike Cycling Apparel. We've been working with them since 2019 now, so it's been quite a few years. Doug, I have some 2022 kit for you to try as well.
Nice.
But they offer fully customized kit tailored to your needs, whether it's you specifically or your team. So we're not just talking design here. We're talking actually picking out the fabrics, picking out the cuts. Do you want raglan sleeves? Do you want inset sleeves? Do you want a collar? Do you not want a collar? Like, that level of customization is available with Adam and everybody at Be Free Ride Bike Cycling. So please head over to bfrbcycling.com now and take a look at how they can help you specifically with their retail shop at the website, or your entire team get outfitted for 2022 and well beyond and look way better than you do now.
Absolutely. And if you are listening to the live stream, go tonight, the last day for you to get your orders in with Grimper Brothers and get them to your house or to your loved ones for the holidays. Go to grimperbrothers.com right now. Get your hands on premium coffee that supports amazing causes in cycling. Dan has so many programs where he gives back to good, great community things in cycling, helping them happen, supporting people that need support. Go to grimperbrothers.com right now. If you sign up for subscription for a year, you get a free bag of coffee, but you got to hit it. If you're on the live stream right now, tonight is the last night you can get it in and get it to your loved ones by the Christmas holiday. So if you want to make that happen, go do that right meow.
And last but certainly not least, our friends at Hand Up Gloves, who have recently made Chattanooga news. We just talked about a trail in Chattanooga, and they've been on the local news recently for getting, being a small business that's based out of Chattanooga that's doing amazing things nationally and globally. So,
did Troy get to make a drink on the local news?
No. That's not really local news friendly. And I think Troy in general is not really local news friendly. But
he's totally local news friendly. He knows how to tone it down. He knows how to tone it down.
That's true. We love you, Troy. So Hand Up Gloves supplies multiple sports and apparel with a range of designs that allows your personality to show through. If you like more toned down jerseys and gloves, they've got that. If you are more of the Doug variety and like everything to be wild and I don't even know what
11.
The second word. What's that?
11. On 11.
I think you're I think you wake up at 11. I think you escalate towards even higher numbers than that at some.
It's possible.
During the day. So if you're like me and you want mellow stuff, or if you're like Doug and you want wild stuff, they got you covered. So the whole gamut. And whether it's golf, snow sports, mountain bikes, cyclocross, apparel, amazing flannels, amazing hats, caps, hoodies, whatever, they've got all that stuff. I've been seeing a bunch of stuff show up on the Facebook shop. You can go to their website at Hand Up Gloves. But for our specific discount for the Pebbles out there that listen to the Gravel Lot, click the link in the show notes. Use code Pebble $ at checkout to save 10% off everything in store. And I think for all of the folks listening to the live stream, are getting very, very close to their Christmas cutoff as well.
Yeah, everybody is right now. If you're on the live stream, everybody's making that happen. We love hearing from all of you. Make sure to visit the website, subscribe to all our social feeds. We are The Gravel Lot everywhere. We are gravellot.com on the interwebs. Stay in touch, up to date, send us messages, do all that stuff. Join us every other Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Streamlabs, all those places, so you can get live in the chat and touch base with us and our guests. We'll try to slide that stuff in. We are so stoked that y'all join us every week.
And our new intro and outro music, well, I guess it's not new anymore.
It's a year old.
The season 4 intro and outro music is from
And
Water.
season 5. I'm not changing the music. We may change design, but I'm not changing the music.
Okay, well, you heard it
Cool.
here first.
All right.
Water. He changed his name. Speaking of changes, he changed his name.
Right, that's enough change we need. It's enough change.
So many thanks to him for the jams. Check him out on all major platforms. Download the music. Thank him for letting us use it. And maybe since we're keeping him as our music, maybe we'll try and find some new jams for you guys.
Oh yeah, we can do that. We can do that for sure. So, Dave, before we let you go, our listeners, the pebbles, because we are all a pebble in the gravel lot of life, right? You know, there are many gravel lots that you've parked in to go mountain biking. What would you want the pebbles, aside from be kind? You already used your freebie on that one. Aside from be kind, what would you want the pebbles to take home from our conversation tonight?
Well, it's so cliche, but just get involved, and it doesn't mean you have to dive in and immerse yourself. If it means, you've got, some financial resources for your local organization, whether it's $15 or $1,500, depending on the means that you have, financial support is very helpful. Volunteer your time, and not everyone wants to go dig in the dirt like the three of us probably love to do. If that's not your jam, then maybe you have some graphic design skills, maybe there's an event that your local club is doing as a fundraiser where you can just volunteer. And if everybody out there, if every mountain biker or 90% of mountain bikers gave just a little bit of money and a little bit of time back to our sport and the trails, it would be off the chart what we could accomplish. So it would be as simple as that. Get involved. And again, you don't have to take that deep dive. If you want to, that's great. There's plenty of opportunities for people that really want to roll up their sleeves and do a lot of things, boards of directors for local organizations, helping with organized volunteers, all kinds of things. But there's a lot of little things that you can do that will add up to, fantastic progress for what we're trying to accomplish. And the organizations, we need help all across the country and beyond.
I like that. So if for anybody listening to this, watching it, if you are looking for how to get in contact, you can contact Dave directly through IMBA. We'll post his email in the show notes, or if you want to just contact us directly, we can be a good filter for that as well.
We got all links to a whole bunches of people.
Yeah, we can be pretty dangerous in terms of getting into somebody's inbox. And I think in terms of rolling up our sleeves, Dave, I would love to put you on the schedule for about this time next year so we can check in and see how Trails for Common Ground is going. Because I think this is something it's going to take a while for it to unfold, and I'd like our community to hold itself accountable and keep pushing these things forward, and I think we can all be a part of that.
You bet. I say Trails Our Common Ground is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as a former marathon national champion mountain bike holder, right, you still have that Stars and Stripes jersey someplace, right? You should get it out for the next podcast and wear it. That's your challenge, is to find it, and you have to wear it the next time you're on.
There you go. Yeah. Finding it, I'm not sure if it still exists or not.
It's someplace. It's buried in a closet someplace, in a shoebox or something, for sure. Well, Dave, this has been absolutely excellent. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad to have had you. It's great to get to spend some time with you.
Thanks, fellas. It was an honor.
Absolutely. Pebbles, honor to be with all of you again. Thanks for being here for all of season 4. John, I think this is like the closing lap for season 4. We'll do one more live stream before we roll it out, but the next episode will probably be in season 5.
The next audio. Yeah. The next live stream will still be in 2021, but the next audio podcast will be season 5.
So thanks all y'all for toughing it out in a heck of a 2021. We're glad to have had y'all along and be in it. We can't do this without your support. Subscribe, follow, engage, do all that stuff. Go to thegravellot.com. Do that. We adore you. And because, as you know, decisions and trails are made by those who show up. If we don't see you on the trails this week, we'll see you next time. Bye, John.
Bye, Doug.
Bye.